If you're one of the millions of Americans who are still not prepared to resume paying back your student loans, I have bad news for you. Unfortunately, the debt deal involves a hard date to start paying back your student loans. Now, the debt ceiling deal made between President Joe Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has ensured that there will no longer be a pause on student loan debt repayment. Now, it essentially codified what the administration has already said, that there will be no more student loan debt repayment pauses. Details of the debt ceiling deal were released on Sunday in the form of a 99-page bill that would suspend the nation's debt limit through 2025 to avoid what would never would have happened, a federal default. They just used this thing as theater in order to push more austerity measures. And congratulations, they pushed a lot more austerity. Yes, of course. So now, the GOP proposal, by the way, had originally planned to rescind Biden's plan to waive $10,000 to $20,000 in debt for nearly our borrowers. That did not make it into the package, but that doesn't mean that student loan debt relief is going to happen. Currently, there are two cases in the conservative-dominated Supreme Court that could spell the end of Biden's student loan debt relief package, and we will all be, as student debtors, screwed. Screwed. Yeah, basically, yes. Now, that's why people are frustrated, because this debt ceiling just puts what Biden had said before through Cardona. It codified it and said, well, okay, let's give you the details, right? Now, Biden has agreed to put an end to the pause on student loan repayment. The bill states that the pause will end 60 days after June 30th, meaning payments would resume in the final days in August. And so that is, again, what he had already said, but this, when signed into law, will become 100% the plan. So now look, the Supreme Court, as I mentioned, they're hearing two cases. And before the deal, one could think that, hey, if the cases fell through, if the Supreme Court rejected it, like we're assuming that they're going to, not because of the merits are bad, but because of the fact that it's a conservative Supreme Court and they hate us. They hate old people who are not them. Biden would at least have the ability to, pause the loans. Now he does not, if this gets signed into law. To me, that tells me he never really planned on making another extension, regardless of what happened. And so that's disastrous. Again, the Supreme Court looks like they're going to reject it. Again, not because it has no merit, as I mentioned before. In fact, one of the cases, two of the cases here. One of them involves two students who, again, say that, we're not going to be, we're not going to get the full, result of this. And so we're going to make sure that no one else gets helped if we're not going to get helped. So that's, again, greed, getting mad that other people are going to get helped when you're not. Okay. And the other one is a bunch of states, Republican states, that say that they're going to lose tax revenue as a result of this. And yet the Supreme Court does not, let's just say that they're taking these arguments from the plaintiffs in the case much more seriously than they do the defense, which is, again, based on the HEROES Act in 2003, which says that Biden can, do these things, take these unilateral actions in the event of an emergency, which the emergency, of course, was COVID. So now, look, the result of this, of course, is you're going to have millions of people who are not financially prepared to begin resuming payments on student loans. So now, detractors will ask, "But what do you mean? You've had years without having to pay your loans. You signed up to pay the loans. These are predatory loans, for one. Okay. A lot of people, when they're younger, don't exactly know what they're signing up for. It's filled with a lot of legalese in these payments. And of course, you're thinking, well, I'm going to be able to get a job, so I'll be able to pay it back. Sure, no problem. Except that things hardly tend to work out. Maybe 18-year-olds making the decision to take out these thousands of dollars or tens of thousands, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans, or at least tens of thousands of dollars that because of interest then snowball into hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of loans. When again, you are 18 and fresh out of high school. Maybe not the best idea to have a system that is based on that. Maybe a better idea would actually to be, to completely eliminate having to get student loans by making colleges, again, these are, public colleges and universities, completely tuition free. Prevent students from even having to take out loans by actually having school be paid for. I know. Crazy idea, right? Real nutso stuff over here.
Pink-haired communist.
It would, again, eliminate the need for a additional bailout, which, again, some people point out, hey, look, if you're just going to forgive student loans, then what's going to prevent these colleges from keeping on raising the tuition and then loading up everybody else, the next generation with a ton of debt, which will then be forgiven. That's a good point. This is why we should make schools tuition free. Solves both of those problems, wouldn't it? First of all, again, you eliminate the debt and you change the way schools are funded. So you make sure that these schools are not able to charge tuition and people do not have to take out these student loans to be able to do it. But we're far from being able to do that, unfortunately. So now, the other topic here, the other thing to discuss is the fact that students not being able to pay is because of the fact that we've had massive greedflation. So you have this inflation. It is driven by corporate profits, meaning this inflation, the amount that it takes for you to be able to afford goods and services and rents and mortgage payments and all this. Well, if you're lucky enough to have a mortgage payment, most people are, unfortunately, are stuck renting, or a lot of people are, because of home prices are insane. But you have this issue where things are much more expensive and you really don't have wages that are matching, that are able to match this inflation. And so you're even further behind than you were before COVID, when there already was a student loan debt crisis. And so we're having that go on. Corporations making record profits. People are falling behind. People are not ready to pay. And yet Biden makes this deal with the Republicans that says, it doesn't matter, you will start paying in August. And now we have made sure that no matter what, if you get relief or not, you're going to have to pay. Disastrous policy. Now, the Debt Collective over on social media tweeted this: resuming student debt payments will crush working families and is simply bad policy. But agreeing to codify the pause as end of the law before the Supreme Court decides in broad-scale relief is criminal. Agreed. The nonprofit Student Debt Crisis Center wrote on Twitter, quote, "We are deeply concerned about the debt ceiling bill ending the pause on federal student loan payments. Take action now and tell POTUS to keep payments paused until debt is canceled." Not going to happen. Not going to happen. So, anyway. Now, look, here's the thing. We are still in an emergency. The federal government says we're not in an emergency, but we're still in an emergency. Now, the debt ceiling was not an emergency. It is a fake emergency. Do you understand? Because of a fake emergency, people that are facing a real emergency, a financial emergency, because of all this, again, reflation, all the stuff that's going on right now, the inability to pay student loans, and yet being forced to do so, and not getting any sort of debt relief, it's kind of BS. That's what's going on here. It's BS. The debt limit made up crisis used to force cuts on average working people, people who are just trying to navigate this system right now, of which our material needs are not being met, where we can barely afford things like childcare, can barely afford things like healthcare, if you're lucky enough to have it, and barely afford rents, food, gas, you name it. What they're doing is they're punishing average people. And yes, you might say, well, but Jeb, you don't understand. You people signed a contract. You agreed to pay them back. You agreed. Well, it's funny because Republicans also, thanks to the Constitution, in their oath to follow the Constitution, agreed to pay the full, debt of the United States, and yet they continue every opportunity they can have that they can try to use that debt limit as a way to force their regressive agenda, their austerity on everyone else, and Democrats go along with it all the time. So please, tell me about debts. Okay, tell me about, you signed a contract, you agreed to pay. We have so many situations where you have Republicans, where you have the right wing that have agreed to pay things or agreed to do things, and they didn't do it. And they reneged on it. And yet, average working people are always expected to pay their debts. Where you have tax cheats right now. One of the most frustrating parts about this, while they're going after students and ensuring that they pay down their debts, for taking out those student loans, you have tax cheats. People who do not pay the IRS their taxes that they owe, being able to get away with a lot of it. The IRS agents that President Biden wanted to increase funding for? Well, now he did get a small increase in the amount of IRS agents. The 87,000 IRS agents. The ones that are supposed to crack down on billionaire and millionaire tax cheats. He ended up having a cut in that as well. Now, Republicans said, no, we don't want any of those any of those IRS agents at all. We don't want to cut down on people cheating on their taxes because that's generally us, rich people. We don't have to pay what we owe. We're going to find our ways out of that. But you people who have taken student loans, you have to pay every single cent plus interest. Does that seem like a fair system to you? No, it isn't. It is a broken system, but it's broken on purpose to make sure that rich people don't pay and you do.